Welcome. Today is the news for July 10th, 2020. You are listening to the podcast titled Counterculture with Aaron Lujan. That's me. If you're watching the Facebook live stream, thank you for joining me. If you're listening on your favorite podcast player, thank you for listening. You're at the gym, you're at the bus, you're at work, you're in jail. I want some prisoner listeners, man. That'd be awesome. I want to corner the prison market. Not even joking. Those guys are real, man. So let's get into it, you guys. Today's going to be a short broadcast because I promised I'd hang out with my wife. And that's a really good thing. So I hope to be done in about 20 to 25 minutes. However, per policy, I may go over. So kicking us off in today's podcast, these are the top stories that I believe, in my humble opinion, should be trending. These are stories that are impacting the culture, could impact future generations, impact your livelihood, my livelihood, our ability to be free people, our ability to pursue happiness, our ability to live in peace, provide a living for our families. So let's get into it. Gabtrends.com, the great Andrew Torba's aggregator, is reporting that the U.S. Army is sending a message that MAGA Columbus Day signs are white supremacy. So any mention of MAGA, any mention of old Americana, I guess this was a tweet that was sent out. And then the Army later redacted or retracted it. Very interesting that the United States Army is going PC. Second news story, also from Gab Trends. This is titled, Gun Violence is Surging in Cities and Hitting Communities of Color the Hardest. So, NBC News is reporting that communities of color have endured the weight of COVID-19, the recession of social unrest, and all this other nonsense like ad block messages because I travel the internet on a VPN, virtual private network. I highly recommend you do it. Problem is that when you go on websites, they don't always let you see it right away. So the point in the article here is that all of this social unrest is impacting predominantly black communities. This is not impacting Anglo people, white people, in the suburbs, in higher income areas. So this is just adding insult to injury. Also, as curated from Gab Trends from the most banned, most hated Infowars.com, the new left says you're a bigot unless you have sex with every gender. It sounds insane to say, but the party that once rallied against gay conversion therapy is coming shockingly close to promoting it themselves, all under the guise of supporting the trans community. So we are going full-blown crazy. In order now to appease the radical left, not only should you accept their definition of gender, but you should also have sex with every single gender, if that was a thing. Breitbart News, Far Left's Breathe Act calls on states to expand voting to undocumented people. It's calling to incentivize states to pass laws to expand voting access to undocumented people. What really happened by the great Mike Rivero, Department of Justice to resume executions next week for the first time in 15 years. 3 executions will take place next week at an Indiana prison by lethal injection, according to the Associated Press. And so I am absolutely, positively opposed to capital punishment. I stand strongly on the side of life from cradle to grave. And that is a bad Trump administration. That is not a good DOJ. The New York the New York Times had an interesting article that I'm going to reverse engineer. Churches were eager to reopen. Now they are a major source for coronavirus cases. So what we have, you guys, in short, is the New York Times made a decision to target Christian churches, particularly because that's obviously the predominant religion of the United States, if you want to call it a religion. But the majority of people in the United States ascribe to a faith in Jesus Christ and into the Holy Bible, the Old and the New Testament. And so the New York Times is labeling that particular group of people, discriminating that group of people into a camp that is responsible for the spread of a disease that in reality is not even that dangerous. But see, the New York Times is speaking to a group of people who have a worldview that coronavirus is the worst possible threat in the world, and it's the fault of the Christians. So we need to put them in the bad corner and essentially create an environment that would make it permissible to punish them. Because once you create a enemy, then you can justify retribution. What really happened is reporting that Donald Trump says flying the Confederate flag is freedom of speech after lashing out at NASCAR for banning it in its latest culture war intervention. I agree with the president. Flying the Confederate flag is freedom of speech. Flying the ISIS flag, flying the LGBTQ flag, flying any flag so long as it doesn't explicitly state that they're going to personally threaten you with bodily harm or violence is free speech. I realize it's not likable speech. It's not speech that people appreciate. I also admit that it's controversial, but it's free speech. It's protected under the First Amendment in the great United States of America. Drudge Report via who? MSN.com. Supreme Court rules Trump cannot block release of financial records. So all my pro-Trump friends, boo-hoo. Trump's going to have to release his financial records. ABC News is reporting that Bed Bath & Beyond is closing stores. Cruises prepare to sail. Bed Bath & Beyond to close about 200 stores over the next 2 years as its sales slid in the first quarter. If you guys are watching the broadcast, you guys are just looking at my unmaned beard because I'm leaning to the right, which is why I suggest you guys listen to the podcast. It's a much better presentation than looking at my racist beard. My beard's racist. I found out yesterday because it's white. Illegal immigration on southern border surged 40% in June. So is the wall helping us? Apparently not. Trump voters, ask for your return on investment. Are you getting an answer? The Federalist Papers by Jared Harris and the Western Journals reporting more than half of restaurants closed under COVID are now listed as permanently shut down. You see, the reason for the scamdemic, the reason for the pandemic was to artificially destroy small business, destroy the real economy. Michael Jones illuminated this idea to me that I quickly want to share with you. We have two parallel worlds. We have two parallel economies in our modern civilization. Economy number one is usury. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Essentially the practice of the financial game, issuing loans, indebting people, printing money out of thin air, creating jobs in the quote financial sector, air quotes, where people shuffle papers, move things around. We're talking hedge fund managers. We're talking people that work within the government contractors, essentially funny money. The other economy, the real economy, what I would call Main Street, is based on labor. Those are your small businesses. Those are your independent contractors. Those are your medium-sized businesses who actually produce tangible value, products and services that people in a free market choose to voluntarily purchase because they're providing value at the right price, and competition is allowing the best services to come forward. And those two worlds have been competing, and E. Michael Jones is arguing that we're now living at a point in history where those two worlds can no longer coexist, and one is going to have to... This town ain't big enough for the two of us, as they would say in the Wild Wild West. I'm really sorry, guys. I am so thirsty. It's all good, though. If you're listening to it, you're crazy like me anyways. What you doing listening to Counterculture? Didn't your mama tell you to not hang around with brown dudes with white beards? Breitbart News is reporting via Catherine Rodriguez, Jacksonville attorneys file lawsuit to stop Republican National Convention. Interesting. So now we're seeing it, I think, in Houston and other cities, perhaps, where the city governments are essentially preventing the Republican conventions to take place. Trump rallies have been threatened to be disrupted. So it's an interesting tactic or strategy that I never saw coming from those who are opposed to a Trump reelection. Fox News is reporting that DOJ Barr, the FBI has made 150 arrests, launched more than 500 investigations related to rioting. So all those fools that crawled out of their mama's basements to go throw Molotov cocktails and burn police cars and attack federal courthouses and pitch tents and chop or chaz and commit acts of violence, you're stupid. They're going to arrest you, buddy. You're going to jail. Stupid. Fox News is reporting LA nursing home dumps residents to make room for new coronavirus patients for bigger payout, according to the city attorney. So, as we've all learned recently, hospitals are making bonuses, thousands of dollars for having COVID patients. I would love to see an investigation on the who's, the what's, and the whys on how that's happening. Because I'll have some COVID patients sleep in my office behind my Chinese restaurant wall here. If you're gonna give me 3 to 8 G's, I'm down. I'm down to get the sniffles for a couple weeks. Opioid overdoses are skyrocketing as COVID-19 sweeps across the U.S. An old epidemic returns, as reported by Yahoo News. So here we go again. 93 lives in West Virginia just over the past 3 months, according to COVID-19. But those killed by drug overdoses caused nearly 1,000 deaths in the same state in 2018 alone. So essentially, I think what the article is underlining or implying is that the opioid epidemic is far more deadly than the COVID epidemic, but we're not allowed to address the opioid epidemic because if you listen to 10 or 20 podcasts ago, I explained that the pharmaceutical industry bought this country a long time ago, and no, they didn't ask for your permission or my permission. They paid it in full. The Epoch Times is reporting that the U.S. to fully implement ban on contractors that rely on Chinese technology. Golf clap. Hashtag golf clap. The Christian Research Network has an interesting article titled Brat Privilege is the Real Problem. Quote, America's current dilemma is not because of white privilege or even black privilege. Our nation is being ruled by brat privilege, where adults who once had sense are yielding to the demands of the immature and the unwise, the reckless and the pathological. Take AOC, take LeBron James, take Stacey Abrams, take Colin Kaepernick. What we have, you guys, is millennials that were stuck in front of a TV because their boomer parents were more interested in chasing RV payments and country club memberships rather than raising their children. And so they are entitled. They've never been disciplined. Fortunately, I got the chancla. All my Mexican people, Chicano people know what that is. For others, I got the belt, the leather belt. It's the reason why I'm not dead or in prison, because Lord knows I had a rebellious spirit. And the rod of correction is what keeps a child out of hell. Government slaves is reporting that the UN watchdog gives Syria 90 days to declare chemical weapons. So keep one eye open for Syria. The Middle East hasn't taken a break just because the United States is in flames. In fact, I would expect more unrest and more craziness overseas as the United States falls into collapse into potentially a civil war. The Ron Paul Forum's Liberty Report is reporting 1/3 of American families miss their July rent and house payments. And 10% fear they could lose their homes in the next 6 months as the pandemic continues. The survey by Apartment List, an online rental platform, found that 32% of households did not make their full payments on time. It marked the fourth month in a row with historically high number of households. And if you can't pay the rent, things get crazy. Among those under 30 years old and those making less than 25,000 annually, the missed payment rate exceeded 40% in July. CBN News is reporting the Navy ends ban on sailors, Marines attending indoor religious services. Great news. Patriot Post is reporting 3 states account for 42% of all U.S. COVID deaths. So let's see what states are. Of course, New York, New Jersey, and I believe that's is that all my massholes? Yeah, I think it's Massachusetts. New Jersey, New York, and Massachusetts. These states account for nearly 56,000 of the nearly 133,000 deaths in the United States, even though they represent just 10% of the population. So, I have an idea. If I was president or something ridiculous like that, I would say, hey, why don't we make this a local issue and shut down those states or those counties if we're going to shut everything down, rather than places like Montana, right? Gannett Syndication Service via the Columbus Dispatch reports black officers who face insults, personal attacks get a double dose of pain and frustration. And it just kind of makes you think about something that maybe wouldn't naturally come to mind, which is, how is it to be a black police officer today? That's crazy. That's really crazy. Pray for those guys because they're doing an honorable job, and the color of their skin shouldn't change the way people treat them. They should be respected because they are law enforcement officers, period. But again, that's, I guess, 1925 logic. This is 2020 where we have 52 genders. Studies suggest broken heart syndrome has increased during the COVID-19 pandemic. This is interesting. Broken heart syndrome, also known as Takotsubo syndrome, a stress-induced cardiomyopathy, occurs when the heart muscles weaken, leading to chest pain and shortness of breath. And essentially, this is caused by people who are imposed quarantine, lack of social interaction, strict physical distancing rules, and its economic consequences in people's lives. See, God created you and I to be social creatures. We were designed to be in family, primarily, and then we were designed to be in relationship with the opposite gender in a commitment, so that we can produce children. And then those families form bonds with other families, which ultimately creates tribes, which benefits those families and then ultimately the individual. So if you remove that natural habitat, if you take the polar bear out of the Antarctic and you put it in Cabo San Lucas, it will die. And we're starting to see people literally die of broken heart syndrome because they're covering their face and they can't have contact. I mean, we are on a global lab experiment right now with all of this contactless face covering going on. It's really, really sad. And it saddens me when I go around town and I see people with their faces covered. I don't even get upset anymore. It's just saddening. The Great Zero Hedge is reporting, fearing cancellation, public figures withdraw support for open letter decrying cancel culture. So cancel culture is so powerful that those who initially had thought of bucking the system and speaking out against it out of fear of being victims of cancel culture didn't fight it anymore. 150 intellectuals, authors, and activists, including Noam Chomsky and J.K. Rowling, signed the letter, which was published by Harper's Magazine. The letter criticized how, quote, the free exchange of information and ideas, the lifeblood of a liberal society, is daily becoming more constricted. As a result of an intolerance of opposing views, a vogue for public shaming and ostracism, and the tendency to dissolve complex policy issues in a binding moral certainty. So if you don't know what cancel culture is, it's Aaron Lujan got into a fight with a black guy when he was in high school, used a racial slur, um, shut his business down in 2020, take his family away from him. In fact, just put him in prison because what he said at 15 in that fist fight, he needs to be accountable and his life needs to be destroyed. That's cancel culture, you guys. We've all fallen short of the glory of God. We've all sinned and we've all made mistakes. And cancel culture is essentially used to cherry pick who they want to go after because we all fall short. So, of course, we don't want cancel culture. Conservative Post has a video of Biden saying the police have become the enemy, quote, become the enemy, end quote, and calls for their defunding. So, Creepy Joe is campaigning on being an opposition candidate to Law and Order. Let's see how that works for him. I'm sure all the moderate Democrats will just embrace that. The Federalist is reporting how the cultural left morphed into a capitalist movement. Well, I think that's essentially skirting around the fact that we've converted into a fascist culture. Breitbart News is reporting that Google, Microsoft, Amazon have enforced thousands of unreported military and law enforcement contracts, including ICE and the FBI. And that's interesting to me because these are also the same companies who claim to be Black Lives Matter, defund the police department, while making money on servicing law enforcement agencies. LifeNews.com, Joe Biden promises to force Little Sisters of the Poor to fund abortions. These little old ladies who've given themselves to the Lord are in a convent, like in their 80s. This is like your grandma on steroids. Like, not literally steroids, because that'd be weird if your grandma was like buff. But like precious little old ladies who love the Bible and love Jesus want to not be forced to pay for abortion pills and pay for abortions. Joe Biden says, I'm going to force them to do it. Well, Sleepy Joe, good luck in the election, buddy. That debate's going to be legendary, man. You guys, America, we are about to witness the best television in the history of television. The reality TV show king turned president, Donald J. Trump, will be facing off Creepy Joe. Oh, I can't wait. Can't wait. I would pay. There's very few things I'd pay for on television. I mean, there was some fights. I forget there was some big Mexican fights a couple years back where like half the country was like, "You watching the fight? Hey, you watching the fight, fool?" I was like, "Nah, fool. I don't have any money." But this one I would pay for. Government Slaves is reporting Illinois Department of Health director admits anyone with coronavirus at time of death is counted as a coronavirus death. So they're just flat out admitting that, oh, that guy got stabbed by his neighbor. Coronavirus. You see what I'm saying, you guys? See, these are the articles that aren't getting in your Google newsfeed. Tell your friends about Counterculture. Please. Text them the link. Be like, there's this brown dude with a racist beard. You got to listen to him. Government Slaves is reporting Fauci says states should seriously look at shutting down again as coronavirus cases rise. Like I said, Fauci should have gone into the fashion industry. Girl, is that your Fauci bag? That's tight. Does anybody say tight anymore? I still say tight. Hey man, your car's tight. Government Slaves is reporting TikTok goes down, prompting speculation that it's been banned. That's good. Sorry, Gen Z. You're going to have to go out and play. Like, ride bikes and drink out of the hose like I did. And get fluoride and have a small brain. Business Insiders reporting people are refusing mandatory orders to wear masks on flights. And it's causing mayhem with other passengers. As it is in the restaurants and as it is everywhere. Because a lot of people, like myself, don't want to be told what to do and don't want to wear a stupid face mask. Speaking of stupidity, Starbucks stores will require customers to wear face masks while inside. Well, guess what, Starbucks? I hope you lose. I hope you don't make any money. Daily Signal's reporting Andrew Jackson statue, who I would argue is one of the greatest presidents in history. If you go to his tombstone, all it says is, "I killed the bank." He was a cowboy president. Like, he rolled up to the White House in his horse, dude. Like, read about Andrew Jackson. Dude crushed it. It was a legend. Legend. Andrew Jackson legend. Real history is riveting, you guys. They make history boring in public education so that you turn to the culture, the pop culture. Andrew Jackson statue removed from City Hall in namesake Mississippi capital. Pathetic. Andrew Jackson is kicking his horse in his grave. By the way, Scrabble is now on the forefront of social justice. Words now being axed by Scrabble Association to avoid offending anyone, according to the Western Journal. 2012 interviewed top flight Canadian Scrabble player. There's top Scrabble players. Interesting. Robin Pollock Daniel let a bit of light in on what the game is real all about. Quote, words are involved, but to me at least, it's more about math. You don't have to know what the word means, but you do have to. I don't know. Sorry, guys, that quote is out of context. Moving along. The homosexual Don Lemon blasphemes the Lord Jesus Christ on national TV. The dumbest man on television, according to President Trump. Let's read what he said. It's interesting. Now, the reason I even pay attention to some of these people is because they have a lot of influence. Don Lemon has far more influence than I do. So it's important that you know who you're listening to and who they are to understand, should I continue listening to them? Should I trust them? This is Dan Lemon, quote, Jesus Christ, if that's who you believe in, Jesus Christ admittedly was not perfect when he was here on earth, Lemon told Cuomo, who offered no rebuttal to Lemon's denial of Christ's divinity. Wow. Cuomo, who also has identified as being a Catholic, said nothing in response. I was just thinking that. Catholic. Cuomo. Okay. There's some real Catholics out there, though, man. I got some really good Catholic friends. But a lot of Catholics out there think they got the ticket to heaven and they're just living like the rest of the world. CNN.com's reporting judge denies Texas Republicans Party's request to force Houston to host party's in-person convention. Very interesting strategy to slow down the Trump chain. Zero Hedge News is reporting that half of Oklahoma is now Indian reservation, according to the Supreme Court. A ruling earlier in the day recognized roughly half of Oklahoma as an Indian reservation, in a move which would have wide-ranging legal implications for the 1.8 million people who now live in Indian country, according to the New York Times. So, see, I thought we conquered them, so we get the land. That's how wars work. I am an American because the Americans won the Mexican-American War, and I'm grateful for that. I ended up on the right side of that fight, and it's sad to see that Americans in 2020 are losing their state to a group of people that lost the land, that lost the country. So it's almost like a reversal. Very, very sad. I hope the people of Oklahoma stand up. Fox News, Richmond's Confederate soldiers and sailors statue dismantled, latest monuments to come down. Just chronicling the fall of Western civilization here on Counterculture. Don't have the source. Oh, of course, InfoWars. Sheriffs around the country refuse to become the mask police. Of course, sheriffs are constitutional. Sheriffs are the last line of defense between tyranny and freedom. They don't want to get caught up on the wrong side of it. They're elected by the people. Last article of the day, you guys, almost on the freaking dot. Yeehaw! 30 minutes on the dizot. I'm happy about that. Yahoo News is reporting the Satanic Temple threatens lawsuit over Mississippi's In God We Trust flag plan. If you guys are curious, go onto my Twitter. I actually had an open debate with the founder of the Satanic Temple. He was featured in a Netflix documentary. He's been on Tucker Carlson's show, and I'd never thought this guy would pay attention to me. You know, I thought he was this big important guy. And so I attack him, and I attacked him. I attacked him intellectually in one of his tweets. He was going after Charlie Kirk. I actually attacked Charlie Kirk and him, and he got into it with me. And I can say, in my experience with our little tiff on Twitter, that he reminds me a lot of like how I was in high school, like trying to disrupt for the sake of disruption, trying to just be a pain in the ass. And in other words, there is no strong principle grounds. I know he argues free speech, and it's an interesting conversation. But this whole idea of First Amendment protection has been skewed and misunderstood. The First Amendment, its intent primarily was to ensure that the government did not get into the business of religion and faith and spirituality. That the United States was founded on this idea that people could pursue or not pursue faith however they so chose. Unlike where the Puritans, when they left in Europe and England at the time, the king did not permit the Pilgrims and the Puritans to worship God in the way that they were convicted, which is why they came to New England and founded the United States of America, or the colonies that then became the United States of America. And here we are in 2020, where you have groups like the Satanic Temple taking the First Amendment and applying it to cases like this, where the majority of the people in a democratic state votes to have certain symbols, certain language on money. So if it's passed and codified into law that the Mississippi flag is going to have the phrase "In God We Trust," then that's legal and permissible, and it absolutely does not violate the First Amendment, because the First Amendment wasn't set up to eliminate or remove faith. It was set up to eliminate and remove the government from the house of faith, if that makes any sense. So get your mind right, get your paper, boo-boo, and understand what the First Amendment's all about. That's all I got for today, you guys. Thank you so much for joining me on the live stream. If you were watching, on the podcast, if you were listening, everything is at aaronlujan.com. Go to the subscribe button, put in your phone number. I may not be on these platforms for much longer. I hope I am, but in the day that I'm no longer there, I can send you a text and be like, blah. Remember me? Let's stay in touch. Thank you very much for listening, you guys. Peace.